Welcome everyone. I am so incredibly thrilled to have you here for another explainer. Today, we're doing a rapid-fire breakdown on the dynamics of leadership. But listen, we aren't talking about optimizing your operational strategy or refining your quarterly metrics today. We are looking at that invisible, often incredibly destructive passenger we all carry around with us, our ego. The source material we're unpacking today is just refreshingly direct. It gets right to the absolute core of what makes and entirely breaks a healthy leadership environment. It's kind of fascinating because, ego is rarely listed on a balance sheet, right? Yet it's responsible for countless corporate downfalls and stalled initiatives. Okay, let's dive into this.
Think your gut always knows best? It's basically a cornerstone belief in leadership circles, isn't it? We are constantly told by business gurus to just trust our instincts and go with our gut. But the source material challenges this right out of the gate. It asks us to seriously consider if that unwavering, unquestioning trust in our internal compass is actually just our ego wearing a really clever disguise. In fact, behavioral science often points out a pretty wild fact. What we proudly call our intuition is frequently just our brain's highly efficient way of validating our pre-existing biases. It does that so it doesn't have to do the exhausting, hard work of actually listening to contradictory evidence. It feels good to trust your gut because it requires zero friction. But that lack of friction, that is exactly where the danger lies.
And this brings us to part one, the ego trap, when ego drives. Because when leaders let their ego actively drive their choices, well, things immediately start to get messy.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what that fallout looks like on the ground. The source breaks down the damage into three stark domino effects consequences. First off, teams stop sharing ideas. Think about the psychological friction here. If a leader's ego takes up all the oxygen in the room, there is simply no space left for anyone else's input. The team learns pretty quickly that bringing up a new idea is totally pointless, so they just shut down. Second, mistakes get hidden. This is arguably the most dangerous phase. When ego demands absolute perfection and the illusion of always being right, well, admitting a fault becomes professionally dangerous. Instead of flagging a problem early so it can be fixed, people sweep it under the rug until it metastasizes into a full-blown crisis. And finally, trust goes completely out the window. Without open idea sharing and honest accountability, the very foundation of team cohesion completely crumbles. People are no longer working together. They are literally just surviving their leader.
Which brings us to part two, the cost of ego versus the great leader. We've seen the destruction, so let's pivot from the toxic nature of the ego to the constructive power of humility. The contrast presented in the source is just absolutely staggering. On one hand, with an ego-driven leader, we see all those systemic breakdowns we just discussed, the hidden mistakes, the shattered trust, the environment where people are simply keeping their heads down, trying not to rock the boat. The leader basically acts as an isolated island, entirely cut off from the reality of the ground floor. But great leaders, the dynamics flip entirely. Instead of shutting down the room to protect their own status or projecting an aura of infallibility, great leaders open their ears. They actively listen. Instead of making every strategic decision about themselves and their infallible gut, they put the team first. They cultivate a real environment of psychological safety. It's a completely different, infinitely healthier operational model that treats employees as intellectual assets rather than just, implementers of the leader's grand vision.
But understanding the conceptual difference is one thing. How do you actually get there? That brings us to part three, the great leader shift. Let's look at the specific, actionable steps to step away from those ego-driven choices.
So the crucial point is the clear three-step roadmap the source provides for making this fundamental shift. Step one, listen. And hey, this doesn't just mean politely waiting for your turn to speak, it means actively hearing your team, engaging with their pushback, and replacing the loud, comfortable echo chamber of your own ego with diverse, sometimes challenging perspectives. Step two, admit when you're wrong. Remember those hidden mistakes we talked about? A leader publicly owning a misstep is the exact antidote to that toxic culture. It immediately signals psychological safety to the entire organization, proving that it's actually okay to iterate and fail. And step three, put the team first. The collective success of the group and the mission of the organization must fundamentally outweigh your personal need for daily validation. It's all about removing yourself as the bottleneck.
The source uses this incredibly powerful driving metaphor to bring the entire concept home. Next time your ego wants the wheel, hit the bricks. I absolutely love the energy of this phrasing because it perfectly captures the reality of the situation. It implies that ego isn't just a passive state of mind. No, it's an active, aggressive, and frankly terrible backseat driver constantly trying to hijack your leadership. Your ego wants to steer you into the fast lane of quick wins and personal glory, completely ignoring the cliff rapidly approaching. As a leader, you have to be just as active. You have to recognize that exact moment when your ego is reaching over for the steering wheel, and you have to deliberately, forcefully slam on the brakes.
So why go through the exhausting, continuous effort of fighting your own ego every day? Well, because of the massive dual benefit. The source explicitly states that both your team and your results will thank you. Sidelining your ego isn't just some soft skills exercise designed to make everyone hold hands and feel warm inside, although, sure, repairing broken trust is obviously vital. But it actually drives tangible, measurable business performance. When people aren't afraid of their leader's ego, ideas flow faster, execution improves, and employee retention simply skyrockets. Hitting the brakes on your ego removes the friction from your workflows and clears the path for sustainable, long-term success. It is quite literally a massive competitive advantage.
Which leaves us with one final, totally critical question to ponder. Who is driving your team right now? You or your ego? I want you to think deeply about your recent choices over this last quarter. Think about how your team reacts when you enter a meeting room. Are diverse ideas freely flowing and being debated, or are they silently stalling the exact moment you state your opinion? I want to leave you with that internal reflection today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember, keep that ego out of the driver's seat.